Welcome to Transition Talks, Business Exit and Retirement Strategies with Josh Ackerman. Get ready to be immersed in real-life experiences and strategies of business owners who have transitioned their enterprises, whether by selling or handing over the reins to the next generation. Through candid conversations and expert insights, Josh aims to provide practical tips and proven techniques to tackle the complexities of succession planning. Let's embark on your next chapter together.
And welcome to Transition Talks, the podcast hosted by Josh Ackerman. Josh, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, as a matter of fact. And I am familiar with your guest today, so I'm looking forward to this conversation between y'all.
I am too, and I appreciate you're the one who said, hey, you should be talking to Geoff. And so I owe this one to you, buddy.
Well, the two of you use the same language. You look at the world in a lot of the same ways, so let's get this party started. It's your floor, Josh.
All right. Thank you, sir. Geoff, thanks very much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I enjoy the conversations we've had, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, I think it'll be great. If you would, just to start out, I kind of know the story, but if you'd go through kind of a upper level, how did you get to where you are, and what in the world is it that you do now anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in the financial industry with a startup company in the early 2000s. I was part of the launch team with a company called PowerShares, and we produced exchange-traded funds at a time before anyone knew what an ETF was. And 15 of us were responsible at that time for 2 ETFs and making those investments available to financial professionals who would then use them within their asset allocation with their clients. And 15 of us brought 50 ETFs to market in just a really short period of time. And we had lightning in a bottle as the ETF world was just exploding at that moment. We raised about $7 billion in a few years. And it was at that time that a mutual fund company, the first mutual fund company to acquire an ETF company.
Okay.
And so Invesco acquired PowerShares.
Yep.
And that was also my introduction to mergers and acquisitions. And it was also my introduction to integrating a small company into a much larger company.
Yeah.
I stayed on at Invesco from 2007 until 2013 and really had a PowerShares ignited and stoked an entrepreneurial fire. And so I acquired a financial business in Denver, 50% of that business in 2013. And we built out that same type of asset management company, making ETF investments available to financial advisors. My business was acquired in 2018.
Okay.
And I stayed on with the parent company for a couple more years. And it was at that point that I was talking to the founder of SDR, which is an investment bank that I'm currently at. This was in 2020. And he was lamenting some of the challenges around succession as he was moving into his 60s. And there's a couple of common threads I want to outline.
Yeah.
One was just the sheer joy that I have experienced over the course of my life of being part of a smaller organization that's growth-minded, whether that was my time as an athlete to this very day at SDR. But there's another common thread that I didn't mention that brought me to SDR, and that was the realization that within certain financial companies like a Morgan Stanley or a UBS, an investment bank is tied and integrated within wealth management and vice versa. And that playbook has gone back to even the 1950s. And what an investment bank does is they help businesses and business owners sell their business, buy businesses, raise money for their business or raise capital for their business. And they also, in a really large scale, they'll help a company issue bonds or go public and have an IPO. SDR helps smaller companies that are valued anywhere from 5 or 10 million up to 250 million, primarily sell their company. That's the vast majority of what we do. We can also help business owners, founders, and entrepreneurs raise money for their business and also go out and acquire businesses. But by and large, SDR, located in Denver, has been around for 22 years, helping founders and entrepreneurs across all industries sell their company and also prepare for that exit. Well, over the course of my career that I laid out for you, I noticed that there was very little connectivity between the financial advisor, particularly the independent financial advisor, versus the individual at Morgan Stanley or UBS, and that founder and entrepreneur that has built and run and grown a business valued between 10 million and 250 million. Even at a firm like Morgan Stanley, they're only dealing with business owners over 250 million. Well, we all know that the fabric of this country are these smaller businesses. In fact, an amazing stat for the audience is that baby boomers are actually responsible for $10 trillion in assets that need to move in the next 10 years. Well, not surprisingly, those $10 trillion are not in shares of Apple or exchange-traded funds or mutual funds. A lot of that is in real estate and small businesses. And so I approached the founder of SDR and said, I believe that I can be that connective tissue between the founder and entrepreneur, let alone the baby boomer, and the financial advisor. And collectively, we can help that business owner make the biggest decision of their lives, one that will impact not only their immediate family, but generations of their family. And that is the type of thing that 5, 10, 20, $40 million, it has that type of impact.
Sure.
And so, Josh, that brought me to SDR. I spent a year talking with the founder of SDR about what it would look like to step in as both an owner of the investment bank and CEO. And over 3 years ago, I did just that. I stepped in as both the owner of the investment bank, SDR, and now CEO. And it has been amazing helping founders and entrepreneurs make the single biggest decision of their lives, but do so in a way that can positively impact across generations. And so I'm excited setting the table with that for the conversation you and I will have today.
I think that's great. I hadn't heard the story of you talking to the founder of SDR, just because it might be relevant kind of for the broader discussion. Did he not have family that might want to succeed him in the business? Because he was stuck with the same conversation that every founder is going to have at some point.
Josh, that's a really, really intuitive and insightful observation you made, because Andy's story is the same as most founders and entrepreneurs. And think about it this way. 10 years ago, a baby boomer was in his late 50s. and his kids were probably in their late 20s, early 30s. Well, in Andy's case, he has 4 daughters, and they have all gone on to very, very successful lives, whether it is an elementary education teacher to a surgeon and everything in between. And 3 of the 4 have married, and their husbands have wonderful careers.
Right.
So part of the story and the founder's journey is the realization that their kids and their spouses don't want to take over the landscaping company.
Right.
Dad,
yeah,
I appreciate your CPA business. Andy, I appreciate the investment bank, but I'm a surgeon.
Right. Right.
I'm a second grade teacher.
Yeah.
And my husband's a plumber. We're not going to take over the investment bank. And then there's this realization, okay, that I have to accept that reality. Now I need to go out and actually find my successor.
Yeah.
And then, is that person inside the company? Are they outside the company? Or do I take this company to market and the succession occurs that way? And a lot of soul searching.
Sure. In your experience, by the time the owner comes to you, have they done the internal search, both inside the company and inside the family, and they know neither one of those options is going to work?
Yeah, more often than not, you're absolutely right, Josh. They're checking these boxes. And a lot of times, internally, no one can actually afford to pay for the company.
Sure.
Especially relative to what the market is paying for a lot of businesses today. And then the next box is the one I described with Andy, the realization, oh, my kids have built a great life for themselves, or good, bad, or ugly, my son or daughter are just not wired to do this.
Yeah.
And so they check these boxes, and sadly, that takes a lot of time. And we routinely warn the founder and entrepreneur, if we use a clock as an analogy, you want to prepare to sell a company and sell your business at 7 or 8 o'clock,
right,
to really speak into the outcome. Josh, what you're saying and what I outlined from a time frame standpoint forces the clock up to 10 or 11. And then the business owner's fate and the terms of the deal get forced on them. And it's not how they would write the script.
Do you see a way other than education to the owner, the founder, about, look, this is the realistic timeline to sell this business, and even before you go and talk to Geoff and start that process, here are the other conversations you need to have?
Oh, my goodness.
Right. And, that's where we get into the part that I think is fascinating, which is talking to the founder and saying, well, who are you going to be when your truck no longer has your company name on it and you're no longer the guy or the owner? You're now Jack or Jill or whatever, and you've got to come up with a whole new identity.
So, Josh, there's the same way there's 2 sides of the brain. What you're saying is there's the 2 things that the entrepreneur, the business owner, needs to address. And it's why we are so passionate about encouraging and empowering them to have a team of experts that surround them. One, that begin unpacking, who am I? Where do I get my value in life? And then how do I how do I transform that so that my life after the sale is as fulfilling as my life has been as the business owner? And that is a really tough nut for a lot of people to crack, and they'd rather not step on the proverbial scale and see what they weigh rather than check their weight every day.
Yep. Right. Right.
But there's also a second piece I really want to encourage the listeners with. And that is, within this team of experts, get your arms around at least once a year what the target is. For example, at a very baseline, what is it going to take so that I do not run out of money before I die?
Right.
And that I am not a burden on the people I love most, usually my kids. And a lot of business owners are shocked for two reasons. One, what standard of living the business has afforded them. And two, how much they actually run from an expense standpoint through the business.
Definitely.
And what happens when that goes away. And so when someone with you specifically sits down and says, wow, somehow I run virtually everything through my business, from my morning Starbucks, the gym, all of my travel, virtually everything runs through the business. And oh, by the way, I pay myself $1 million a year, and that's what we live on.
Yep.
And then you come back and say, well, statistically, you're going to live another 30 years.
Right.
And here's what it's going to take to not change your standard of living. And then SDR comes in and once a year says, well, guys, here's really what the business is worth, because here's what someone's willing to pay for it.
Right.
And then we all work together. And through you, they've got a target. They've got a destination. Then, of course, it's moving. Life happens.
Exactly. Exactly.
But most business owners, sadly, they don't create the target. And when I talk to them, I'm like, all right, so what's your strategy? And then this is almost verbatim what they say. They say, well, for 20 years now, I've gotten up and I've done the right things, and I've, done the right things by my clients and customers. And at the end of every month, I've got more money in the bank than I pay myself, and we have a better life than I ever imagined. And I figure at some point I'll sell the company and it's worth something, and it will be enough. And so I just call it out. Well, that's based on a lot of hope, and we all know that hope's not a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's use some numbers. Let's get some data.
Yeah. And we have a client that sold the business, and he and I talked a couple months after the deal had closed. And I asked him, what do you wish you'd known before you started this? And he said, Josh, it's the thing that you tried to get me to do, which was get my arms around how much money do I actually spend on a monthly basis.
Josh, do you know that 70% of business owners regret selling their business in the first year?
I've heard that statistic, and I think it is terrifying.
But I believe that together we all can minimize that dramatically. Because what is that regret? It's really rooted in the unknown and fear. It's what you just said. Well, I really have no idea what I spend, and I wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I'm going to run out of money.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, and I don't remember if you and I talked about this story, but I've got another client that sold a business for a good chunk of change. And he texted me on a Wednesday afternoon, random Wednesday in April, and said, Josh, I'm the richest guy in this restaurant, and I'm having lunch by myself.
Oh, my goodness. That's unreal.
And because his friends were coworkers and customers and suppliers. That's who he socialized with.
Yep.
You know, and I spent 10 years in a corporate job and had people that I went to lunch with on a daily, weekly basis. And after missing a couple of sales meetings, not being in the cafeteria when someone did something funny, you figure out there's really not much in common anymore.
Right.
Right. And so of that group of people that I would have considered friends, I talk to one or two of them now. And so I think it's really dangerous for, and I think this is maybe more American than other countries, but American men especially, we wrap up a tremendous amount of our identity into what we do. And if you are a successful business owner, that's one of the best identities to put on in the country, right? That's the top of the heap. Mm-hmm. And you've got people that listen to you. You've got important decisions to make. You've got what I think of as kind of the right kind of stress. It's the stress that gives you something to fight against. And I think that's part of how we're wired. But I think it's dangerous for those people who are wired to take on that stress to try and quit cold turkey and wake up, you know, after the victory trip to Italy or to Africa or whatever it looks like. And you're home, the bags are unpacked, you've done some laundry, you wake up, it's a Wednesday morning, and you're looking around going, well, what am I going to do now? And the danger of the successful sale is the danger of choice. It's, well, you could do anything you want. And so there's no restriction. And it was easier, life was easier, and I think this is part of the 70%. Life was easier when, well, it's a weekday. I'm going to get up a couple minutes before my alarm and go make coffee and get to the office before everybody else shows up because I'm the boss.
Right.
Right. And there's only one choice. And then you get to the finish line, they hand you the trophy, and Geoff hands you a big bag of cash. And now you could stay in bed all day if you wanted to.
Right.
And I think that's, to me, that's the interesting conversation, because it is something that I feel like you and I, working with a client, could make a real difference in their life.
You know, Josh, there's another aspect that I really want to share with the audience. And in addition to the things that we've addressed, the other thing that weighs heavily on the business owner is the people that I love the most. This liquidity, this money is going to destroy their lives. And with a little bit of planning,
yep,
specific to the estate planning, in coordination with you, we find the business owner not only doesn't destroy the lives of the people they care most about, namely their grandkids, but they empower them. And the same is true with charitable strategies, which oftentimes go hand in hand with tax strategies and estate planning, all with you at the very center, orchestrating all of this. But the conversations that I have seen business owners have when the estate is established, mm-hmm. and if they're charitably minded, there's a charitable strategy, the amount of fulfillment on the other side is unbelievable, because that business owner, it's not just about this liquidity event and
right.
the pile of cash. It's the stewardship of what they've seen occur, particularly if it's a multi-generational business, but what the realization of what they've done with that money is more fulfilling than the liquidity event itself. And I really want to emphasize this, because in working with you, there is so much more benefit when these conversations are had while the business is still in place versus after the sale.
Yeah.
Still profound after the sale, but from a tax, estate, transfer of wealth, the levers that you can pull are much, much greater when the business is in place. And people often ask me, well, how much time do I need to, definitely before there's an LOI, but probably about 1 year, before the sale itself.
No, I would agree with that. 'Cause I think the more time you have, the more levers, as you said, the more levers you have to pull, and the better they work. If you wait until the deal is done and you've got a big check, and we have to go through the conversation of how much of that check do you actually get to put in your pocket? Well, you're going to get what the math decides you get. There's not much we can do. But the earlier we can start that conversation, the more things we can do to kind of make sure that more money stays in your pocket and money goes to other places where you want it to be.
So, Josh, you touched on something, and I really want to foot stomp the point that you're making. Business owners and those that make unsolicited offers to business owners to buy their company, their eyes are completely on the headline number or the gross number. And at SDR with you, we talk the most about what we call the net proceeds. And that is the cash that goes in their pocket, particularly the cash that goes in their pocket at closing. And you and I have been touching on different strategies to get there. But one thing we haven't talked about, which will be illuminating to the audience, are the terms or the structure of a deal. Yeah. And most business owners surprisingly believe that it's like the sale of a house. They'll sell the business, put the keys underneath the mat.
Yep.
The buyer, whether it's a private equity company or a family office or whoever it is, or a strategic partnership, they're just going to lift the mat up, grab the keys, and walk right in. And that is rarely, if ever, how it happens. And if it does happen that way, the amount that the business owner receives is actually discounted because of those terms. So how does it play out?
Yeah.
Well, oftentimes there's a sale and there's a percentage that is cash at close. And then there's a few other different scenarios. Seller carried note could be part of it. If it's a private equity company, more often than not, they really incentivize the seller to take 20 to 30% and roll the proceeds into their private equity fund or the holding company that owns their former company. And with all of that, the message that I send to business owners is realize, going back to the clock, you're going to sell the business. And yes, the buyer wants you to be able to be extracted from the company. They don't want the company to rise and fall on the founder. But at the same time, they want you to help integrate your business into them, their business.
Yep.
And they'll even incentivize you heavily to grow so that they can realize their objectives. And so what a lot of business owners don't realize, going back to the clock, is a lot of times it takes about a year to get your ducks in a row.
Yep.
It takes 6 to 12 months to sell the company itself. And then it could be 1 to 5 years, very, very realistically, that you're staying on.
And working for somebody else.
Working for somebody else, something you haven't done in 30 years.
Yeah. I've got 2 clients who did that, and they were partners, and they referred to themselves separately and together as chronically unemployable. They hadn't worked for anyone in, one of the guys I don't think ever did, and the other one hadn't had a boss in 30 years. And they sold the business, and the earn out period where they had to come in and do what somebody else told them they needed to do, and they had it was an adjustment for both of them to try and figure out how to make that work.
And it can be done, and it's done all the time. But you really need to psychologically know what you're signing up for. Like, this is where I'm going. And a big part of what you and I do is to know what cards are in their hands, cards face up, and say, all right, let's create options. We figured out what the destination is. We know what the target is.
Yep.
And Geoff is telling me that if we take 100% cash at close, after taxes, here's what you're going to have. Can we hit the target?
Yep.
And if the answer is yes, we have those cards face up. And on the other side of that, we may say, hey, you could get, if everything works out, you could get 50% more in 3 years, exceed your target, but you're going to work for somebody else.
Yep.
And you're going to hand them your baby, and you're going to watch them raise your child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you handle that?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you handle having a boss that's maybe the same age as one of your children?
Right. But Josh, let's change the scenario a little bit. So let's say we're having this conversation. We're in the same room as the business owner, and we realize 100% cash at close doesn't hit the target.
Yep.
Like, they're going to run out of money and they're going to be a burden to their kids. Then we sit down and say, okay, I can tell you, here's your earnings, or here's your EBITDA. Here's the multiple someone's paying versus your EBITDA, 5 times, for example. If we know what your target is, you then know, okay, I have to increase my EBITDA by 25%.
Yep.
And then Josh and I can come back to Geoff and say, okay, we did what you told us to do. We increased our EBITDA to 25%. Can we now take the business to market, and with a high conviction, can we hit our target? This is where these conversations are so powerful.
Well, exactly. And to your point, and I think that's the interesting thing. I was talking about this morning. The stereotypical financial planning scenario is the new client comes in and I say, Geoff, nice to meet you. Tell me your goals. I'll write them down. I'll go in the back and do some math, and I'll come back and tell you if we can hit the goal. And the longer I've done this, the more convinced I am that the real job is helping the client figure out what are the right goals, Because once we know what the goals are, then we can have the conversation with you that says, hey, here's what we think the number is. And you could say, we're not quite there, guys. We need to do a little bit of work. You know, if you, as you said, if you can bump up EBITDA 25%, I think we can hit that target. Well, now we can do it.
But Josh, to add insult to injury, tragically, what a lot of financial planners will do in the conversation you're describing is they'll go, well, Tina, tell me what your business is worth. And Tina says, well, my friend at the country club just sold his business, which is in my industry, for $20 million. And we're pretty much the same business. You can use $20 million. And then the planner's like, oh, $20 million. Okay, I think you're going to hit all your goals. Good job. Carry on.
Congratulations. Yeah. Exactly. Well, Geoff, I really appreciate the time, my friend. This has been great.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
If someone's looking for you, SDR Ventures, and you guys are in Denver, Colorado, right?
Yeah, but we serve business owners all over the country. We've done some work internationally for what it's worth as well, but all over the United States, across virtually all industries, over 22 years. You can share my email. Our website is sdrventures.com. And I look forward to serving. That's what we're here for.
Exactly. Geoff, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Josh.
That was a great conversation, gentlemen. Every bit as good as I thought it was going to be. You know, I've got a question for both of you sitting here listening to it. And it takes us back a little bit in the conversation. But what happens when you as a business owner, you're looking at this and you've got a family member, your son or a daughter who's like really interested in the business. And you know, because you weren't sure, you've done your homework, that your business is worth X. How do you balance the family dynamic versus a market dynamic? I mean, I hate to throw money in competition with family, but I think it's a legitimate question in this case. Or am I wrong?
So, Bill, I'll give you a good example. We represented two generations, founder, his son, and they were preparing the grandson to take over the business. And oddly enough, and this is the story of this country, the company produced wooden pallets. Think about shipping pallets.
Yep.
Year in and year out, the company was probably worth about $5-6 million. Under those circumstances, the third generation could have shepherded the business. But what happened was Amazon took effect and shipping became elevated. And then when COVID occurred, it went through the roof. And in a perfect storm, there was issues with the price of lumber out of Canada. And so this company, and then lightning in a bottle, there are certain industries that private equity sink their teeth into, and they just bid up the value of these companies by competing against each other. Well, oddly enough, somebody at Harvard told them to focus on pallet companies. And so they start buying pallet companies, and a company worth $6 million sold for $30 million.
Wow.
And the conversation internally was, hey, if we really love our son and our grandson, we are doing this young man a disservice by dropping a company with about $5 million at that point in earnings in his lap. Instead, let's take the chips off the table and let's buy the grandson a company that we can mentor him with, and he can grow it. So that's one option. The other option is, and this is in line with what you're saying, hey, we're going to need somebody, whether it's a COO or a CFO, that's going to walk alongside that young person and give them some guardrails so they don't blow themselves up, and hold them accountable. Because what you see across generations is the founder gave virtually everything, every waking hour to that business. And the Gen 2 and Gen 3 looked at that and they said, I'm not signing up for that. I saw what my dad and my granddad did. I'm not going to pay that price. And so when it gets thrown in their lap, you just get less commitment.
Yeah.
There's nothing on there's no gun to their head.
Now, the other side, and this would be in the smaller businesses than Geoff is probably working with, but the business owner who every dollar they make that they have to invest goes back into the business, because a privately held business is a fantastic way to make money. So they're used to 30, 40% return on investment. So when it comes time to leave the business, they don't have money outside the business. And we have a client of Dad's. Dad worked with Gen 1 and Gen 2. The business is now on Gen 3. And Gen 2, and these numbers are made up, but the scale is about right. Gen 2 let his son run the business. Gen 2 took $120,000 a year out of the business to fund his lifestyle. Son was literally doing all of the work. Dad didn't come to the office. And son was taking out about $30,000 a year.
Ooh. Josh, I've seen that.
So that's the other side, right? Is the question of, okay, I want to get out of the business, and the business needs to pay me what I need to live because I built it. But at the same time, I want to give the business to my son or daughter, and they miss the idea that someone somewhere has to have a checkbook, right? And that's a trick. That's a real trick. Oh, you know. Yeah. And then the other question of, we're going to give Sally the business that's worth $20 million. What are we going to give Jimmy? Jimmy's going to get the wedding china. That's what Jimmy's going to get.
No, it's a huge problem. And so does Jimmy just have to wait until the founder passes and the founder's spouse, and then force the issue onto, the person actually running the business? And inevitably, Jimmy's like a junior high PE teacher making $50,000, and the other sibling running the business is making $500,000.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Oh, well, no, it goes back to what both of you have emphasized over and over again, and I've heard it from you, multiple times. If you own a business, you need to, one, think about things well in advance of when you're going to be doing them, and two, you need to be communicating with everybody involved your intentions and what you have planned. So, and in case anybody listening didn't get that, I just reemphasized it for everybody. Yeah. I apologize.
That's all right. No,
hey,
that's
Josh,
it.
We know how to get a hold of him. We know how to reach out to Geoff. Let's close it out with how people might be able to get a hold of you as well if they want to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, we are at Context Financial, CONTEXT, financial.com, in Lexington, Kentucky, but we can work with clients all over the country.
Super. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast while you're out taking a walk or driving the car, you don't need to write that stuff down. It's in the show notes. You can check it when you get back, and you can do so safely and not be a distracted walker or driver, okay? The other thing you can do is, if you're not already a subscriber to Josh's podcast, become a subscriber. And that's easy. Just hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button. That way you will be notified when new episodes drop, and you can listen, and you will never miss another episode. And there are a lot of good conversations in these episodes. You don't want to miss them. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Josh and everybody at Context Financial, thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. And I will remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. The choice is yours. Thanks for taking the time. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Transition Talks, Business Exit and Retirement Strategies with Josh Ackerman from Context Financial. Are you a business owner looking to sell or make a transition? Connect with Josh on social media using today's show notes links. You might just be his next guest. To ensure you don't miss a new episode, please click the follow button. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Context Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The context is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.